Do you guys want to change this and just make it a sour? Because I know you love them so much.
No. I do like them.
I love the 12% Imperial Stout with coffee and maple, and that sounds
We've just
good,
been talking for 40 minutes. We're not going to just change like
Okay, maybe next year.
Although Henry was the first person to take us to Sour Jesus.
Nice.
Cheers.
Tap Takeover Podcast, episode 30, recorded October 17th.
All right, welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast, and this is a fun day for us. We contacted Henry about a couple weeks ago and asked him to help us out with a collaboration beer or something that we can do for a one-year anniversary that's coming up in January. Henry's idea was, hey, we can actually do the whole process of the crowdsourcing. So we can show you behind the curtain so you can see how everything is actually done. Because right now everybody thinks Mobcraft crowdsourcing, but what is that really? So Henry, do you want to just kind of tell people what we're going to go through this process?
Yeah, definitely. So, when you got a hold of me, it was like, oh, this is a great idea. Since we've interviewed with you guys 8 months ago or so, you've obviously gone and interviewed a billion other awesome breweries and have made quite the name for yourselves. So when you said, I want to make a beer, I was like, hey, that's what we do. We turn ideas into beer. The whole entire model that we operate in operates under that same premise. So I wanted to go through the whole process of how we come up with ideas, how we vet those ideas, and then eventually, once those beers get up for a vote, what we do to go through and brew them.
It's really nice to be back at kind of the scene of the crime, of our fourth episode at Mobcraft Brewing here. Henry, it was really fun for you to have sat down with us the first time, talking about your sour barrel aging program and, all the fun beers that you guys do. And it's been amazing that you're willing to sit down with us, guys who just really like to drink beer.
So do I.
Create this beer with us. This is a lot of fun.
All right, so I guess where do we start? It's ideas right now. So it's like we want a beer that kind of defines us.
Yeah.
So right now we're really into the dark beers, heavy beers. What does that mean for your scheduling, and is that something that's doable?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing that I want to talk about is, so you come in with this with an idea. When we're doing our crowdsourced beers, it's that exact same thing. So it's perfect you saying, we want a dark beer. That's a great spot to start. You don't have to start out with, this is my grain build, this is my mash temperature, I want to hit this, original gravity, I want it to finish at this Plato, and you don't have to be that scientific and nerdy. You know what you like.
That's why we left Jim at home.
Perfect. So that's a great framework to start within. But even more than just a dark beer, because there's so much difference in variation, you could have a 2% ABV dark beer. Do you guys want a 2% ABV dark beer?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right.
Isn't it just water?
That would go against everything we believe in.
So muddy water is out. So we're looking something a lot more on the rich, higher ABV side of things. Decent malt backbone. And that's why I'm glad that I have my business partner and head brewer here, Andrew Gierzak, who is like the king of malty AF beers.
Starting off, it sounds like you guys are leaning more towards porters and stouts right now. I doubt you guys want to do like a Schwarzbier, like a dark lager or anything like that. You're probably going to want to
Yes,
go a
and
little
the
bit
other
heavier.
part was the time of year. We like these hazy, fresh IPAs, but the timing, we didn't think it was appropriate. Or
Yep.
we wouldn't. We're not going to be in the mood for that in January, February.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
you
kinda
guys are going to
thinking
want a
about-
nice, robust, rich, dark beer to satisfy and slake your winter woes.
Exactly.
Wow,
We're
exactly.
kind of thinking around January, around the time of our very first anniversary, and around the time of our anniversary with our episode with you guys. Somewhere in that area would be, I think, perfect.
So we're leaning towards what, like an imperial porter or a stout?
Have
Yeah.
you guys ruled out things like, like strong ales and barley wines?
What about a foreign extra stout? Have you guys had any good examples of foreign extra stout before?
No, I'm not familiar.
What is
with
that?
What is that?
Foreign extra stout is a specific style of beer. Dogfish Head makes one. Obviously, I think Guinness also makes one as well. But it's a really, really high ABV, really dark, rich, like almost along the veins of Russian Imperial Stout, but a little bit on the drier side.
Now, Andrew, one thing from my perspective is, if we brew this beer, we will also have to sell it. So, we
You mean
can't
people aren't lining up around the blocks to buy foreign extra stout?
We've done a lot of
Golly gosh.
doing these crowdsourced beers. We've realized over the years sometimes the beers don't sell as well as some of the other ones. So yeah, I definitely want to keep that in mind. That when we pull a beer off, if we're going to brew a 30-barrel batch of it, which is the vessel right over there. Sorry, cue cameras. So if we're going to brew 30 barrels, that's 900 gallons. We'll be cranking out around 60 half-barrel kegs of it. Tap room, that can definitely go through a bunch of it. We want to do either some cans or some bombers, depending on the style that we come up with, and then a few places around town. So
then,
as long as the people will want to drink it.
Is that another reason you go higher alcohol, just in case it does have to sit for a little bit?
Yeah, from my home brewing days, I would always drink most of the keg, and then it's like, wow, this tastes perfect right now. After 3/4 of the keg is gone. Some of your bigger beers, they need a little bit more of that time to just sit and mature and mellow. So I would definitely recommend, if we are going to settle in that 8 to 12% range, that we probably would want that beer to sit and last out on the market for a little bit longer.
I think that's a really good idea. Yeah, and I think we've been kicking around a few ideas. Like Jesus said, we were thinking about something in the hazy New England style, but not quite right for the time. We've really been pushing the imperial stouts on the podcast. The barrel-aged imperial stouts, the big bold beers that, like you said, can really hold up over time. So let us throw a couple of ideas at you. Some things that we've noticed as we've kind of gone along with our interviews, little tricks that we've seen at other breweries. We were thinking about maybe some sort of a coffee variant on this. We've interviewed, Raised Grain and Eagle Park, and they both use this coffee from Hawthorne. It's a bourbon barrel aged coffee.
That's excellent fucking coffee.
You've tried this, okay?
I know about Hawthorne. They make some awesome coffee.
So we were thinking, is that even a possibility as far as getting that into this beer?
Yeah. We always love pulling in all sorts of different ends of the collaboration. For instance, we always do a shout out to the cranberry bog we get our cranberries from our sours. Our Batshit Crazy uses Valentine coffee from over in Tosa. So as many local parties as we could work with to make this beer come together, it's awesome. The only thing that I would say about coffee, since our flagship beer is brewed with coffee, the trial and error on different types of coffee and how those taste is pretty immense.
Gotcha.
Like Andrew, when we first started doing the serious trials on Batshit Crazy, we tried 3 different roasters and probably 3 or 4 different actual roasts to find that blend.
Now trials would be a lot easier now with the already accumulated knowledge we have from our existing coffee brand beer. It's like,
yeah, I
at
guess
that
the
point
first
it's
time around, we were like,
running
should we try
trials would
light
be really
roast or
easy.
should we try dark roast? Now that
Yeah.
you know what works best, makes sense.
And it would be very beer specific too. It's like, if you're using, in my opinion, if you're throwing coffee into a beer that's already got a bunch of dark roasted malt, like a really dark roasty stout, you may want to stay away from highly roasted coffees, like really dark coffees, just because that might go overboard with the roasty character. And you might want to stick to more lighter roast characters that have a lot more coffee aromatics stuck with them.
No,
that's just my
good
2 cents.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah.
So we like to hint the barrel that being lended to the beers we've tried. And one thing that we were talking about is sort of pulling ideas from all the different breweries we've interviewed.
Yeah.
And letting you guys do what you do and just mad scientist the shit out of it, right?
Oh, sweet. I like this even better.
So, one idea that we did have, I don't think you could really source it anywhere this time of year, was Enlightened did the maple sap From the Roots, which I thought lent a really excellent mouthfeel to the dark ale that they did. I thought that could really lend a nice, creamy, heavy mouthfeel to a porter or a stout as well. Be very kind to that.
Yeah, do you know if they used any lactose in that beer at all?
I'm not sure. That's something we'd have to ask.
Because that milk sugar.
Was that maple sugar or just maple sap?
They used
It was
maple sap instead of water.
Oh, for the mashing. I remember that now.
Yeah.
Yep.
But, and in lieu of that, because I'm sure maple sap is tough to get this time of year.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
even
don't think you can. Unless anybody's is anybody out there frozen a couple 100 gallons of maple sap? Anyone?
But in lieu of that, possibly like a maple syrup addition, just to kind of get that creamier mouthfeel and that little bit of extra sweetness to go along with the coffee. But again, we're just kind of throwing ideas at you
as
guys.
the ideas start,
spitballing.
You let us know what sticks.
Yeah, as the ideas start forming, it's a darker
I'm
beer
loving all these ideas right now.
with
Andrew's on page 4 of notes already on his computer.
I think the idea is really to take this heavy beer, have some coffee, but take the edge off with some sweetness of something. And
Like a heavy roast beer, and then like you would add some coffee and a little bit of maple syrup to kind of take the harsh edge off that bitterness and all that roastiness that
sometimes
you're going to get
coffee,
with darker beers.
yeah, sometimes that coffee just comes in too, in your face. That it'd be nice to just take that edge off.
Yeah, so we're looking at something that has a whole entire blend. All the flavors kind of meld. We're not looking at it to say like, hey, here's a coffee punch. Hey, here's a maple syrup punch. We want this to be a beer that's built. Everything's kind of subtle, but they all contribute to the overall complexity and flavor of that beer to make it really well balanced.
I think that's exactly it. Yeah.
Cool. I like well balanced beers. Are there any characteristics out of some of the recent stouts of ours that you guys have tried that you really liked? Either the Kaplan's or the anniversary beer?
I really like the Kaplan's. That hint of vanilla. How exactly did you guys get that? Was it laid over vanilla beans?
We spent a ridiculous amount of money on vanilla beans.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like, is this gold or is this vanilla beans? It's like this big in my hands, and I only know how much
vanilla was
a
really bad crop year in Madagascar.
Well, I know the pirates.
I didn't even know about the pirates, but I just knew it was a really bad crop year for Madagascar vanilla.
There are pirates who go and steal vanilla beans from
because
and sell them on the black
it's really expensive. It's like $700 a case. I used to work at a restaurant, and that's what they paid. They paid $700 a case for vanilla beans, so they're pretty expensive.
That's ridiculous.
And also use vanilla beans.
How much came in a case? What was the weight?
It was like 22 pounds. Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah.
It's up from that because
it's definitely up from that.
Well, yeah, I think we got 3 pounds and they were $1,200 on the Kaplan's. I mean, I write the checks, so
yeah. I mean, that sounds about right.
You would know.
They're an expensive little orchid bean flour thing because they're from orchids, right?
Yeah, it's an orchid. I think you're thinking of that combined with the cocoa nibs.
Okay.
That's what it was. Because
that'd make a little more sense.
So when you're
Still
spitballing like kind of ideas like this, I mean, you can't just keep on adding. It's like the price. I mean, you're probably thinking right now, how much is this going to cost?
Yeah.
What gets you the most bang for your buck? I guess
Well, it's not as much bang for the buck. It's can this marginally increase the value of this beer? Because you could just add everything. You could layer this and this and this and this and this, and the beer's not going to taste any better now that you've put 400 freaking ingredients in it. So I kind of look at it from that perspective, like maple syrup plus vanilla, plus coffee. Like that would be a lot of different ingredients going into it, and could we layer those equally?
Absolutely.
So Andrew says yes, and I know he's correct because we did a beer called Blood of a Con that was stout, brewed with cayenne, coffee, cacao nibs, and vanilla, right? So I mean, the 4 ingredients, and those were all incredibly layered. Like every sip of that beer, you got something. You got the nose, and you got the first tip of the tongue, then you got the back of the palate, then you got the little beer burp, and all those flavors tasted different. You could pull out each one of those ingredients. So I mean, that's where your whole, micro side of things and the flavor chemistry comes into play. That is way over my head.
So how many test batches went into that one, the Blood of a Con?
We had to go through probably 5 different test batches. The first one we did, it was the first 5-gallon pilot batch that we did was undrinkable because it was just so bloody spicy.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up being the big factor in that, was figuring out the right level of pepper and chili to put in that beer. And turns out it was nowhere near as much as the submitter or we even thought it would be. We ended up using less than a quarter of what the recipe originally called for.
Yeah, and that was a really fun beer because the guy who submitted it, his name was Drew from down in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he owns a coffee shop, and the Mayan Mocha coffee is one of his standard items on the menu. So he was like, hey, I make this coffee at my coffee shop. Do you guys want to make this as a beer? And we even used the beans that he uses at his coffee shop to make it. So it was awesome that he had this dialed-in idea of what exactly he wanted it to taste like and, could get it through.
I think the one other addition that we had talked about too was coconut. That would lend itself well to all the other things we brought up.
He wants to start right now.
Andrew's not going to sleep
Andrew
tonight.
excited over there.
I'm loving it.
So what do you think about that, coconut? Like something...
Oh, yeah.
I guess the question is, with the maple syrup and the coffee, is the coconut going to add enough, like you were saying, to make it worth it? Or is it just going to kind of get lost
Coconut's
a little bit?
going to do a couple of things for you. Coconut is going to add, there's a little bit of fat in coconut. Even if you buy, dried shaved coconut, there's still, a certain amount of fat content to it. Fat will ultimately, at the levels we're using it at, it will probably impact head retention a little bit, but we can do other stuff in the malt bill and the formulation to kind of overcome that. But like the main thing that's going to do is that fat is going to provide a lot more rounded character. So it's going to smooth out, I think, a lot of that harshness you guys were talking about earlier. And I mean, obviously, what that's going to become, depending on how much we add, either a very minute or very prominent coconut flavor. Depending. We've experimented with coconut flakes here before, and it worked out awesome.
Well, the first time we used coconut back in like...
Aloha Dankeschön.
Batch number 5.
And we used flake coconut for that, and that ended up
ridiculous.
working out really good.
Wow. It was a very, very good place.
So
the only problem with that one was that we had a couple coconut floaties in one of the bottles.
We've figured that out.
We have a filter now.
Yeah, we have a filter now.
So getting back to like the crowdsourcing aspect of it, so we're throwing a bunch of ideas. It sounds like it's maybe a lot of ingredients in here. Mm-hmm. When you go into the process with someone, how do they know, like, how many test batches do you work with them? I mean, when in the process does that happen?
So how it works with, go ahead, Andrew, because you're the man who
I was going to say, it really depends on, I mean, a lot of people, it depends on what the person's looking for. A lot of people have a pre-designated recipe that they brewed before, and they'll say, yes, this is exactly what I want you to brew, and we pretty much replicate it at a commercial scale. A lot of other people, on the other hand, are just submitting literally an idea, and they have maybe only the vaguest notions. So we kind of walk through them at every step. Like, we try and include them as much as possible throughout the process, and we say, okay, if we do this action at this step, this is the kind of beer it's going to end up coming out to be. And so we just kind of walk through we walk through with the submitter at every step. Hey, what do you want to do? How do you want this to turn out? And we haven't had any issues with that so far.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the majority of things that come across our plate are, I've tried a beer like this. Can you recreate something like this, but with some features of this? You know, so saying I really love big, thick, viscous stouts. You know, where would these 3 ideas for different flavors go into it, play out? Can we do all of them? Can we do some of them? So from this aspect, I think we're like settled on a nice stout. Sounds about right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
What ABV wise? What do you want to hit? Do we want to hit stout that you can go out and
15?
Okay. All right. I think the highest ABV we've made is 8. 8. Wow, yeah, that'd be
We've
weak.
done 12.
Yeah. 12,
We've done
but
12 to 13. We can do
fermented.
15. If you guys want 15, we can make 15 happen.
No,
Let's
15
make that happen.
That's
How about
aggressive.
you go
That's
for the strongest you ever done and just
you
do
wanna
like
get
12, 5,
nuts?
13.
you want,
the only problem, I mean, you
I
can
also
push
want to
that,
challenge myself, though.
Let's
Like,
get
why
nuts.
not?
but that beer's not
let's get
going to be
nuts.
good right away. I mean, that beer's
Yeah.
going to be incredibly hot for
yeah.
a decent amount of time, and then we might as well wait until July to make a hazy IPA. Fat. Awesome, because they're super tasty.
so maybe that's a bit aggressive.
Yeah, no, I think 12. I think 12 is well within reasonable.
Well,
Yeah.
you know what
For
would be
this beer.
fun? So with obviously barrel aging doesn't fit in this timeline.
No.
But dependent on what you do with it, there are small barrels that come from smaller distilleries that have a lot less surface area in the barrel, hence you start soaking up that character of it a lot faster. And then we could also set some aside and see what it might look like next year.
Okay, I like
But the
this
only problem
idea.
with that,
Yeah.
though, is if you build a beer to be consumed, it's going to be a lot different than if you build a beer to be consumed after a period of time worth of aging.
So what if we went with the...
So we're back to 15%.
yeah. What if we went with the barrel-aged coffee beans like we talked about?
Yeah.
Ooh.
And then you
Is
put
that
some
a thing?
of... Yeah.
Because I had a beer with barrel-aged coffee beans.
No, that's
pretty
what
good.
That's what we were
the
talking about
Hawthorne the
before.
Hawthorne was actually the beans themselves were
Barrel
barrel
aged.
aged.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard
So
about
it
that.
could impart aspects of the barrel aging and the coffee all at the kind of the same time, which it was, for smaller breweries like Raised Grain had been and like Eagle Park is. It's a really nice way for them to impart that barrel aging without actually having to have an area in their brewery for barrel aging.
Mm-hmm. I think that would be very fun.
I would totally be down to do that on like a smaller scale because I don't even think Hawthorne could supply us with like a full 30 barrels batch worth of like barrel aged coffee beans. Plus, going back to the cost earlier, but I would love to that's a nice thing about doing larger batches. We can do all these weird kind of fun one-off experiments off this batch.
Well, we also
and just fool
have
around with it and see what happens.
quite a beeline on barrels. Like if we just needed to get barrels,
Yep.
we could, and then.
How long does it take to age coffee in coffee barrels?
I think we should ask somebody else who's done it before, because I have no clue.
That'd be kind of interesting, though, if we did one version of just the regular stout, and then throw some of that product into a couple of barrels and see how it does after 6 months to a year or something. Even have an anniversary beer for this year, and then a barrel aged version for next year. That could be kind of fun.
Like a little guy. So
over the coffee barrel aged beans.
Yep.
That's interesting. I like it.
That would be cool. So, all right, let's talk about that then. Hey, Josh, you want to come up with a beer with us? So, have you guys met Josh? Josh is another one of our brewers.
How's it going, Josh?
Brews 90% of all the beer?
Sure, why not?
Exactly. So we're talking about maybe making a stout for January. We're going to, with the Tap Takeover Podcast, to celebrate their 1-year anniversary. We were on the show in April?
No, it was early
February.
March. Yeah.
Yeah, I think March. Yeah,
March
that
of
sounds
last
about
year.
right.
And so we're going to brew an anniversary stout. It's going to be in the ABV range of 10 plus-ish.
Okay.
Maybe even up to the 11-ish. Something big and nice.
Right.
Then we have talked about there's a barrel-aged coffee bean out there.
Hawthorne.
Hawthorne makes it. That would be
Okay.
interesting to use. Coconut just came up. An addition of maple syrup.
I think it would be either or. I think.
No, I'm just saying all of the things.
Yeah,
that we
these are
talked
the
about.
ideas.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So those are the
one or
three-
the other for sure.
Yeah, something to take that edge off the big beer.
Yeah, so we're
I
thinking
mean,
like all the roast.
I'd like
character.
another stab at a maple beer because it worked out so well last time.
Yeah, I
you
know, really.
But yeah, that could be fun.
So I guess then what is the next? I guess you guys have ideas.
Well,
So are you? I'll go for it.
yeah, well, Jim was more of our technical side, and he couldn't be here tonight, but he did send us some ideas, more technical ideas for you guys. The Maris Otter for your base, right? And
Right,
then,
I'm giving that 4 thumbs up if I
Yeah.
right? And then for, I believe it's called, it's just like a specialty malt, C170, which is
Okay.
Patagonian
Okay.
malt for extra roasty. Said pale chocolate malt from Breeze, touch of wheat, and oats, lots of
Was
fucking-
that C170 or C70?
C170.
170. I actually
that
think
from-
proximity makes a good equivalent to that.
Well,
I think
actually,
Yeah,
that's
something
why this.
equivalent, you know.
The
Like
reason that came up is Proximity Malt was one of our interviews. We'd love to have them kind of folded into this also.
Oh yeah.
Because
When-
I think proximity makes a really good C160, which would be very, very close and right down the street.
Exactly.
So that'd be
Yep.
a really good equivalent to use local ingredients.
on our last batch of Laughing Clown, the chocolate stout, we kind of reformulated that recipe and used a bunch of their malts, right?
Correct.
And
Yeah.
that's what really helped give that
Yeah.
like super delicious chocolatey characteristic out of the beer.
Yeah. We did a really strong blend of their pale, their standard, and their dark chocolate, and all three of those combined really set that beer off quite a bit.
So this is what's really fun about people submitting ideas for beers is you could go as easy as I want this maple syrup 11% chocolate beer, come up with it Mobcraft, or if you're a home brewer yourself and you know specific malts that you love, this is what we can really nerd out about it, because if you know these characteristics of the malts, that's like next level stuff that we can pull those ideas into formulating the actual grain bill for it.
The last
that's
idea he had on there was oats. Lots of fucking oats.
Flaked oats
yeah.
or regular
He
oats?
did not specify.
Okie dokie, we
Yeah.
can figure
I
that
mean, are we
out.
talking mouthfeel, just creamy mouthfeel?
Either way, no matter what oat you use, it's going to build a lot of mouthfeel, a lot of roundness to the body, and really smooth that beer out.
Cool. Well, I love those suggestions for grains to use. I think we got to decide, like, we were talking residual mouthfeel and sweetness to kind of we were talking residual mouthfeel and sweetness to balance out any kind of roast character. So I think we should either go the oat realm or the maple realm.
Okay.
What do you guys think, or do you want to just go?
You could do
we
a
even
little
go
of
with
both. Kind of the standard rule of everything in moderation. It turns out the best. So a little bit of everything tends to work out pretty good.
Okay, so then on the next list of things we would use or axe off, we've got some vanilla and some coconut that we talked about. Maple as this other sweetness in it, and then we go with a little bit of this grain bill we've started to develop. Or should we axe those extra adjuncts? Use those extra adjuncts. What do you guys think?
I'm always in favor of adding more.
And
I like this guy. I like this guy.
I mean,
I like you.
I would tend to say take your pick of either maple or coconut, but everything else falls right in line with a really good beer. So, wherever we want to go from there.
Yeah, I guess my thinking
The
was
thing-
either or. I mean,
The thing about maple is that maple, the way we would add it, and this comes back to just our processes, like maple syrup is essentially, we consider that a fermentable adjunct. So we would add that during fermentation and make sure that as much of that is fermented out as possible. And unfortunately, what that means is with a lot of that fermentation will come a lot of the depletion of that flavor for that maple syrup. So, I mean, you wouldn't get a super strong maple character coming through to the end. It would probably be subtle depending on how much we added. But again, that's a fine line because the more just straight sugar you add that's fermentable, the drier and less body the beer tends to have. So, I mean, there's a couple of factors at play. I mean, I'd be down for adding a little bit of maple syrup, but like I said, the overall impact it's going to have on the beer is going to be super, super mapley. Like the only way you can really get like super mapley beer is by either using essence or by pasteurizing the beer after and adding basically syrup at bottling, which a lot of home brewers.
Fenugreek?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Those years at Brewing Grow are paying off.
Yeah, when I worked at the homebrew shop, we made a maple beer that contained actually no maple syrup. It just used fenugreek. Basically, it tasted like straight maple syrup, but it had like none of the body or viscosity that you would associate it with. So you tasted this beer, and it was.
This really makes me want to experiment around with
It
fenugreek.
totally
Yeah,
blew your
that's-
mind because you're like, this is straight maple syrup, but it tastes like a normal beer. What is going on here?
a part of me likes this because the brewers that we talked is all this experimentation, all this like I kind of like that.
I want to
don't know, what do
experiment
you-
around with fenugreek now.
Yeah, what do
I
you
want to
guys
do all
think?
the things all the
Is-
time now.
I mean, it's
I think you guys might be right. I think maybe it's either or on the coconut or the maple. And
Right.
From what you were saying about the coconut and what that might add as far as the body of the beer, that might be the way to go. Especially if we're going to do like a coffee coconut kind of combination.
Yeah.
I think that could be a really fun beer.
Awesome.
I'm just tied up with this fenugreek idea because one of my favorite beers that we ever made was the one that we used. We used ginger and cardamom, and do you remember? Was it the Forward Fest beer that we made a long time ago? This was like way back in the House of Brews days. We had raspberries. We had
I can't remember if we used
ginger.
fenugreek. I know you used
no,
cardamom.
we used cardamom. But
Yeah.
that cardamom spice. So when you're looking at flavors in a beer, you don't get as many flavors at the end process from things that have sugar in them because those sugars get fermented out unless you want bottles to explode on the shelves. So spices contribute a lot more flavor. So that's
Right.
fenugreek kind of.
yeah, of course.
If you use the fenugreek, would that overpower anything else in the beer?
Well, that's why
Not
we
if
would
we
test
use
it
it the
over
right
and
way.
over and over again.
So, I mean, that's a flavor that a lot of people associate with maple syrup, anyways, because that's going to be like the primary flavor additive to most of your run-of-the-mill kind of off-the-shelf syrups.
Aunt Jemima.
Yeah, you're
TM.
yeah, you're Aunt Jemima, you're that kind of thing. It incorporates that main flavor that most people associate with it without adding that just overwhelming like thickness and viscosity to the beer. But as with everything, you want to kind of keep it in moderation, otherwise it gets over the top. You start to pull across that this isn't quite maple type flavor.
Could you pull viscosity and mouthfeel from other ingredients?
Oh gosh,
yeah.
those
Oh,
oats
yeah,
are gonna do that
absolutely.
for days.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the oats are going to be one of the main contributing factors to that, really rounding out and building that body.
Because realistically, the maple syrup won't give you body. I mean, we're gonna ferment up most
Right,
of the
right.
sugars
I
out
mean,
of that
that-
anyways. So now you have maple
Yeah,
syrup
that's-
alcohol.
So all you're
and-
going to taste is, maple and nothing else, because, I mean, maple syrup is straight simple sugars. That's all going to ferment out to complete dryness, and you're going to be left with those very, very small amount of flavor compounds that actually your brain associates with maple syrup. So,
But we'd have to add a lot of maple syrup to make that happen.
right. It would,
Like drums.
yeah,
Which
that,
we can do. We've done that in the past.
yeah. Basically, that'd probably be something as opposed to a secondary edition, that'd be kind of a whirlpool edition. Throw that straight in there right away when we add the yeast.
So I think we should either go the coconut route or experiment with the fenugreek.
I
think
would love to go coconut route, and then let's just play around with some fenugreek and just see what happens.
Yeah.
well, the thing that we do in all the crowdsourced beers is take the base beer and then we'll rack 5 gallons off, and then we'll experiment with in that 5-gallon batch. So if we're gonna try some fenugreek, we'll crunch up a bunch of freaking fenugreek and throw it in there and see what it tastes like.
Cool.
5 gallons at a time, and
love that.
like on the Blood of a Con, there was those 4 or 5 different trials that we did to make sure we had it right. So none of these ingredients are going to go in pre-fermentation, which is the great part, because we can build that base beer. This all comes down to the addition of all the specialties that we want to add into it.
When you get down to those specialty ingredients, there's really no way to handle it but to do trials and see what works and kind of make the beer as you go.
Well, I need a beer. Does anybody else? I'll go grab you one.
Yeah, I could definitely use a beer.
Yeah, let's take a break. Let's take a break.
Okay. Tap Takeover dudes, Mobcraft Brewer dudes, let's finalize this recipe.
Cheers.
Okay, so we're back after the break, and I think we're ready to finalize a recipe here. We've batted it around back and forth. We've lost a couple brewers, just like we're going to be cutting down some ideas here. So we're with the man himself. We're with Henry Schwartz at Mobcraft, ready to finalize this idea. So what, if we could kind of pare it down, Henry, what are you thinking here?
All right, so the things that we all agreed upon were heavy and dark. Yes?
Oh, yeah. Correct.
All in
Yes.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great. So we're going to do a 12 ABV beer. We were leaning stout. We sticking stout? We going to bring porter back into the game?
Imperial Porter or Stout, whichever way you guys think is the best way to do that, I guess.
1, 2, 3, whatever one you want. 1, 2, 3, stout.
Porter.
Stout.
Porter.
What's the difference between a stout and a porter? Tap Takeover Podcast, dudes.
Go ahead.
Well, stout is obviously higher alcohol content. It's aged a little longer, right? It's a bigger version of a porter, the stout is, correct?
There are certain characteristics that you'll get out of a stout that you won't get in a porter. Often you'll see that the body is a little bit different in a stout. You'll see a little bit more roast in a porter sometimes and a little bit more residual sugar in a stout. I think we're going for residual sugar. We're going through for mouthfeel. We're going through thickness.
Yeah,
so
more
I think the
viscosity
stout would
to
probably
it.
be the best side of things that we wanted to go
Stout
through here.
wins!
All right.
Yeah!
I'll
Because
change my
that's
vote.
what we were kind of leaning
All right,
towards.
we'll change our vote. Okay.
Suck it, Porter!
So we're going to put a little bit in barrels, see how it does. Not a ton, but we can probably go out to a couple local spots. We can, go down to Twisted Path and over to Great Lakes and see if they got a barrel they want to share with us.
Cool.
Notes ahead aside, over time, a beer that has great body is going to kind of slowly start to fade. Like if you ever tasted a super barrel-aged beer, the minute it came out of the fermenter, you'd be like, whoa, syrup. We were debating on the coffee and maple syrup side of things. We definitely want to do the coffee. I think that was
I
first.
think we
Yeah,
definitely
well,
want to do the coffee. I think we were kicking around the idea of the Hawthorne barrel-aged beans in the hopes that we could get that barrel-aged flavor. But if we're going to barrel-age a certain portion, I think we could just go with a regular coffee. I don't think we need to go that specific on the coffee bean.
But we could make a very small amount of a barrel-aged coffee bean barrel-aged stout.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, boy, that's
I was-
Yeah, we
I like it.
can do all sorts of layers of stuff.
Okay.
We'll talk about that next year.
What do you think, guys? We're leaning coconut or maple? I'd say maple.
I thought we were leaning towards the coconut.
I think we were leaning towards the coconut.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
Play
was the
with
consensus.
that other thing.
The maple
Oh, but I
did
heard all the
sound fun.
Mobcraft brewers say they wanted to play with fenugreek, so...
You can play with that too.
That sounds like you got like 10 different variations.
Well, I love the idea of maple syrup. I know from firsthand experience the difficult parts about that. You add in the maple syrup, and because we want that beer to ferment out, we can't pasteurize anything here. So we can't put sugar back into a beer, pasteurize it, and then have that residual sweetness be there. The yeast, that's still, even if you pass through a filter, there's going to be yeast in there that'll continue to eat sugar, and we don't want sugar consumed inside of a bottle because that bottle will explode.
So is it possible to maybe 2 test batches, one with the fenugreek and one without,
Yeah,
and just kind of see where we're at
Yeah.
with that ingredient?
Because what we would probably do is stout is brewed, coffee additions are added, beer is crash cooled, and then we'd rack off 5 gallons of it. We could do, well, no, I back up, because if we're going to add maple syrup, that has to go through in some sort of fermentation. So that'd have to be added back in where it could go through and ferment, whereas the fenugreek, being a spice and having no sugar in it, would be added at a different spot in the time.
Well, I mean, cost-wise for you, how much fenugreek costs per se?
Neither do I.
But couldn't you play with the fenugreek and the coconut together and see how that melded? I mean, if you could.
Wait, we're still doing coconut too? So
No,
we're
I
gonna do
think-
coconut
I think
we're
we're-
like
I think
coconut,
either or.
maple.
Either or.
We're on 2 branches.
Yeah, I think we were, after you described it, maple sounds like that's the way we want to go.
Well, I saw everybody's hands go up in the air when they said coconut. It was like,
Yeah.
coconut feeling coconut.
I think we were just excited
We
to
could- we
get
could also-
anything.
We love coconuts.
We could also just go 1, 2, 3 coconut or fenugreek. 1, 2, 3.
Maple.
Coconut.
Oh, is that 3 maples and 2 coconuts?
Yeah.
We had some people change. All right.
I think
All right,
maple
so we're going
wins.
maple. Maple.
wins.
I mean, if
All right.
it was the vote was back out there, I had to go maple.
So what's going to be really fun about this, though, is we'll be able to test this at a couple different spots in the process. We'll be able to take beer out of the fermenter when it's warm, because we want to do all of our adjuncts that have any kind of sugar in them while the beer is warm, so it continues to ferment. But we'll crash cool some of it in the cooler. We'll do a fenugreek addition, and then we'll also do a secondary fermentation with some maple syrup, and then we'll check those flavors. We'll see which one we like best, and then we'll move forward with either one of those.
Wow. Okay.
Love it.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool.
Well, that's the technical side of what awesome beer sounds like.
A whole lot of spitballing, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I mean, and the malt bill that we nailed down when Adam and Josh were hanging around, that seems perfect. It'll be awesome to rope in proximity malt from down the street, because realistically, some of the best stouts that we've made have been using some of their chocolate malts, so I'm really excited for that.
Okay.
Plus friends
So-
of the podcast, so it's awesome to get them back involved.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, where we're at right now, we've got a beer. We are brewing a stout. It's going to be 12%. It's going to be brewed with coffee no matter what. We're either going to dive into brewing with maple, or we're going to use some fenugreek to give it maple-type character. Regardless, we're not going to advertise that it is maple if we would use fenugreek. It's just going to be a characteristic that builds the complexity and the balance of the beer. So, if you were a beer fan sitting out there and you wanted to submit this idea to Mobcraft's website, this is pretty much what you'd have to say. I want a stout. I want it to be 12% brewed with coffee. And then I want to get a little bit of maple character out of that. However you guys want to do it, take it from here. So, we'd go through the process of coming up with the exact grain bill that it would be. All of our brewers would kind of sit down at a table, they'd talk about it. That recipe would be posted on the website, and then each month we take 8 recipes, just like this one. You guys got a little head up on everybody else because you were like, hey, we run this awesome podcast, let's do a collaboration beer. And I was like, yes, this is perfect.
It's our limited celebrity status.
Yeah.
This thing's finally paying off. All right.
You think way too highly of us, Alex.
No, I just like you guys. You know, you are very fun people,
Oh.
to tell you the truth.
We try.
Yep.
I'm glad Jim didn't come. That's fine.
So anyways, from there, we'd have this one recipe be one of the 8 that are up for vote, and then we'd put it up to the people to decide if this recipe has merit versus another recipe. And the people who decided that the recipe with the best qualifications would be the one that we would brew each month. Obviously, we're going to go forward and brew this beer. So let's talk about the timeline that you guys would like this beer to come out in.
We got one more question.
Yeah, oh yes.
So,
Any other questions?
The hops don't go too much into a stout, but what kind
They
of
do.
hops?
They do.
So what kind of hops would you recommend? Because we have no idea where to go.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
that.
So hops in stouts are very, very important because you need bitterness in a beer. If you just brewed a stout with no hops in it, it would be just not good.
Well, yeah.
So we're not going to use any sexy hops. There's no Citra. There's
Mosaic.
Something.
no
something-
CTC,
something
no
to gain the
Mosaic.
There's no
bitterness.
need.
This
for
is
that,
just
yeah.
straight high alpha bittering
But we
hops.
could.
Why would you?
This is where I tell you to stop wasting my money. Jesus.
You're making it harder to sell.
I was waiting for you to say when is the time that you're just going to tell
You
people
know,
they're crazy.
There are a lot of when I was homebrewing too, we would, way back in the day, we'd be like, oh, let's do our 60-minute all Citra, like everything, blah blah blah. It's like at that point you're wasting all of the potential out of that very nice juicy hop that you could get because it's going out into the atmosphere. You put in a 60-minute hop addition and it is boiling for 60 minutes. That means all of your aromas are going to just jettison out through the smokestack out into the atmosphere. So for our purposes, we use a hop that gives a good amount of bitterness when we're doing it at the front end of the brewing process. We don't need really any aromatic hops that are going to go into this beer. There will be finishing hops, but they're not going to contribute pine, floral, sexy mango, all that kind of
And the
stuff.
hop would be the same, either style, maple, doesn't matter. It'd be the same hop.
Nope, I really don't think so. The only difference, the majority of our bitterness is probably going to come out of the like long-term bitterness coming out of the roast of the malts. So we're either going to combat that with, if we try this beer. So this is the fun part about experimenting. If we look at the beer and we say, man, we're trying maple sweetness, which is sweet,
in the window over there.
and then, oh man,
Come on in.
So we've got Mike Doble from the Explorium who just stopped by.
that's how it goes. Come on, take a seat.
Hey, everybody. What's up?
How's it going, Mike?
Hey, come
Take
on
a seat.
in.
Come on in.
We're doing a
We'll give you a
Tap
little-
Takeover collaboration beer with Mobcraft. I think we've settled in on a 12% ABV Imperial Stout with
I like
some
it.
sort
Coffee.
of coffee and
then,
maple.
Then we're deciding if we're going to go maple syrup or if we're going to use fenugreek. Ooh. So we're just talking about the difference of if you're going to add a adjunct that had a sweetness to it and the recipe that you would brew. So this beer is most likely going to be brewed to be dry, knowing that it might get maple syrup. And if we would get to that point where we try the test batches of the adjunct additions and say, maple syrup fermented out provides this. The beer by itself with the fenugreek provides this. If we needed to add any residual sweetness or residual body, we'd probably substitute a little bit of lactose milk sugar to give it that, creamy mouthfeel. Because these are like two adjuncts that are going to be a little bit different. You do have residual sugars that are going to come from the maple syrup, and you do have no sugar from a fenugreek. So
Man, I love the idea of a coffee stout with maple syrup in it. That sounds awesome.
I feel like you just came in here and just like did one of these.
No, I'm like totally stumped,
in the
man.
water and the malted barley.
Where's my little take my money gift? I love it. That's awesome.
Nice.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm actually here with my brother Dave from Tampa Bay Brewing Company, and he's got his head
sweet.
brewer in. And we did a collab today. We did a kumquat cranberry saison. And so we just came from company. We had some dinner at Company Brewing, and I wanted to come down here because you have the whale, the sour stout.
Oh yeah, that black whale is
Black
very
whale
good.
is.
Do you guys
I
want
know.
to change this and just make it a sour? Because I know you love them so much.
No,
I like
I do like them.
I love the 12% imperial stout with coffee and maple, and that sounds
We've just
good,
been
man.
talking for 40 minutes. We're not going to just change like
Okay, maybe next year.
Although Henry was the first person to take us to Sour Jesus.
Nice.
So everything sounds good so far?
Oh, dude, you don't need my endorsement, but you got it.
All right.
All right, we
I
appreciate
mean, that's
it.
awesome. That sounds really good.
So,
Yeah. So
we're-
if this beer was an idea that was submitted by the Mobcraft crowd, at this point the recipe would be formulated to be on the site. People would vote on it, and the next stop would be the brew day. So we're obviously going to be brewing this beer, trying to get it out in January. So we got to jump on the production schedule and see when we might be able to make this fit, because we got to have you guys come back out to brew the beer with us.
Yeah, we know
Might
you
have
guys
to take
are
off
busy.
work a little early,
You guys
know.
got a
but-
lot of
I
stuff
vote
on the
yes.
we're going to have a few people brewing here with us, I think.
So, I mean, this being a 12%, we need a little bit more fermentation time on it. Not a ton, but we usually like to give it a week more than our, traditional 6-7% ABV beers. Just because, one, you don't really know what's going to happen. If we do have to add maple syrup, that's going to push that fermentation out a little bit more because we want that to ferment out. So we want to have ample time to project this. But I'm going to scroll down on the projection schedule, and we'll see what we got here. What date would be your ideal date that this beer hits the market?
January 11th is technically our
That was our very first episode
very
on
first
111.
episode. Yep.
Well, my production schedule doesn't go past 12/31, so we're gonna call that as the potential end date.
Okay. So Mike, assuming that this beer gets done on time, and assuming it turns out as good as we're all hoping, is this something that you guys might consider putting on tap at the Explorium?
Oh, hell yeah, man. No, I love stuff like this.
So the other,
Especially
and you
when
can-
it's like other, Milwaukee Craft Brewery League beers.
the idea we were having was we've interviewed, a handful of brewers. You're going to be next, by the way. We want to actually get them involved and have this hopefully as a guest tap at all the places we've been.
Yeah,
to.
no, I'll tell you right now, we'd put that on tap.
Awesome.
Especially if there's coffee and
There's
maple.
one barrel sold, Henry.
Well, and you can forget to pay the invoice too, like I did with your collaboration beer until
No,
today.
it's all
You're
good.
like, hey,
It's
did
all
you
good,
remember
man. I
this
know where you
invoice?
live.
I'm like, oh boy.
I know where you live.
Yeah. Sometimes the inbox monster eats things.
No, I totally get it, dude. Totally get it.
All right, so we're looking at a probably early December / last weekend in November to brew this beer, if we're gonna get it out by that time in November.
Sweet.
So we can definitely put it on there. I mean, you guys are batting some crazy beers. We're doing your favorite style, the New England Hazy IPA.
Oh, nice.
This one's called Apocalypse.
So when is that going to be released?
That, I don't know, January-ish. Well, I've always wanted to make a beer called Seasonal Creep.
Okay.
Honestly, I mean, one of the fastest beers that we sold out of was our 9.8% chocolate stout in July.
Yep.
Nobody else has 9.8% chocolate stouts in
July's
July.
a great time for a chocolate stout.
Yeah. And then we've got Flanders Red, which is going to be after that. Super excited. The 2018 variation of Sour on the Vine, which is sour brown ale aged on grapes once the harvest comes out. So right now we're literally fermenting the grapes of this year's Sour on the Vine. So it'll be sandwiched in between those 3 beers.
Yeah, so we have an anniversary party coming up in January.
Nice.
Provided we make it that far, you know. I mean, you know, never a given. I hate to look a gift horse in the mouth.
If people start, paying you, then maybe.
Yeah, no. If some of our invoices get paid, we might be able to make it.
Yeah, that $280 is going to make or break it, right?
But that would be a great beer to have on for our anniversary party. So you know how we love having, when we do big parties, bring everybody in, put different beers on tap.
That would be fun.
Yeah, that's kind of a cool one. So that's something I'll probably set in the cooler for a couple weeks after your release on the 11th and put for our anniversary party.
That's great.
It'd be pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hey, so speaking of putting beers on tap, you guys did that collaboration with 1840, and that just got put on tap tonight as we're speaking.
Yeah.
How did that go? How was the big release?
Went real well. I mean, that beer is awesome.
Yeah.
So it's our Dock Ray Scotch Ale, aged solely with an isolate of Brettanomyces that gives off like sour cherry and cherry pie filling flavors. So if you imagine our Scotch Ale, it's this big sweet Scotch Ale, been super dried out by the Brettanomyces, but it still has those great flavors of cherry and pie. I mean, we had it so we went over to 1840 at noon today. We had it in bottles to see what it's like. Actually, my brother Dave was with me, and we tried it out of the bottle at 1840. Then we went over to the Explorium, and we have it in kegs. So the first time ever 1840's beer is on a tap. So it's kind of cool. So they have this exclusive bottle club where they buy bottles, and it's kind of the first time that somebody can just roll into a pub and buy a pour of that beer, and it's just awesome. It turned out really well.
Very cool.
So Kyle's an extraordinarily talented guy. I had nothing to do with it. We just made some wort that we make all the time, and he put it in the right barrel. He aged it for the right amount of time with the right strain of Brettanomyces, and turned out awesome. Really, really good. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
So that was tonight, and a lot more to come. Actually, my brother Dave is here. We did that kumquat cranberry saison, and we actually gave 65 gallons of that collab to 1840. So they're gonna act. So it's now a 3-way collab, I guess.
The 3-way.
Yeah, a little 3-way action.
That's
going
what we
on.
want.
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
So he's taking that and putting it in a barrel. So hopefully for our anniversary party we'll have that one as well. So it's kind of cool.
So do you want
Were
to
you
take
sitting
a
on
barrel
any
back
of
to
the,
Tampa Bay? Or,
Yeah, we're actually gonna do that. We're actually gonna ship some of the saison that we're doing, ship it down to TBBC. So Dave's in town right now with us. Tomorrow he's going to Pipeworks to do a collab. And then what are some of the other places you're hitting?
18th Street and Sour Note.
Yeah, so 18th Street and Sour Note is at the
hitters.
end of the trip. So they're going to take all these beers they're doing as collabs. We're all shipping barrels, and we're going to get together and fill a pallet, ship them down to Tampa, and they're going to do an event with all these Midwest collabs. That they're doing.
Nice.
So it'll be kind of cool, kind of fun.
awesome.
It's just fun. I mean, we're out tonight, like hitting different breweries, and trying the good stuff, drinking. So of course we're at Mobcraft.
Yeah, you came to the right one tonight.
what do
Yeah.
brewers do in their downtime? They go to breweries.
They go to breweries.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
what do you think of the Milwaukee beer scene so far?
Milwaukee beer scene's badass. It really is. It's really cool to see this scene just kind of. Sorry, it's really cool to see the scene just open up and what it is now. It reminds me a lot of the Tampa scene back in like 2009 or so. You can just feel the vibe and see it, and it's just about to explode. And this town's always been a beer town, but you can see the craft beer people in this town just starting to explode.
All right, let's get back to our beer. Enough of you guys.
I'm gonna go drink. Good to see you, man.
Are you guys sticking around for a little bit?
Yeah, we'll be around for a
Yeah,
little
we'll
while.
catch up
sweet.
with you guys. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Yeah.
guys.
That's awesome.
All right, let's talk about our beer now.
Yeah.
Well, this is what happens when you sit in front of a window.
We got the seal of approval there.
We got the seal of approval. So where are we?
sold the barrel.
So keep on telling us where we're at in the process here, Henry.
Yeah, so we got stout, 12% coffee, maple or fenugreek, 5-gallon test batches on each side of things. We're brewing this beer, the base beer, around the last week in November, first week in December, and we're going to shoot for an early 2017 release.
Love it.
18,
All right.
right?
Yeah, that's how years work. If you have my brain, it doesn't work well. Yeah. Years,
Awesome.
months, days. You know, they're all work days. That's
As long
all
as
I
it's
know.
on the calendar.
Right?
Yeah.
What is the next step?
So next process for us would be putting it and actually booking it in the production schedule. So we do a lot of different things. We take when we would have to order raw ingredients. We take when we would have to start brewing. We take when the brew would probably finish. We have a couple flub days. Then we take all of our laboratory testing. And then we have a go-to-market date. This one is obviously a little bit different where we're going to add the ingredient additions. So we'll probably take, a weeks-long period of time in between when fermentation is done while it's sitting in a fermenter for us to run a couple trials on it.
Sure.
Because most adjuncts that we'll add to the beer, we need at least kind of a 2-day sit time. Coffee is a little bit shorter than that, but if we're going to sit something on fenugreek or if we're going to let something re-ferment with maple syrup, the fenugreek might take a day or two, or re-fermentation might take 3-4 days or so. So we want to make sure we have enough time to make all those additions happen. Then we'll be able to, about the time we brew, start talking about a label. When we do this on the crowdsource aspect, when we set the brew day, whoever wins the crowdsource round, we fly them out to come brew with us. So in the past, we've done beers with people from like Washington, D.C. One that you guys had heard about was the Girls Pint Out beer. So there's this organization of women who enjoy beer around the U.S. They have chapters in every single state. We did a little crowdsource voting around amongst all of those people. And then a woman from Washington, D.C. actually came out to brew a beer with us. And we did the Girl Grey IPA, which was a Earl Grey IPA. Very, very fun beer. So that process of like, hey, come brew with us. Let's just hang out for a couple days because, you like beer too? Huh, go figure. Let's have some fun. So we brewed the beer together.
And I'll say that was a fantastic episode for us. We sat down with Maggie, the Milwaukee chapter president of Girls Pint Out, also Kelly. It was a really fantastic time just sitting down with them. They talked very highly of you guys and the whole process of the voting and the coming up with the idea. It sounds like Maggie even came up with some of the ideas for the name and the logo.
Yeah, she did the whole can design.
Man.
I had no clue
It
Maggie
turned out
even
great.
did graphic design. I just thought she was awesome and liked beer.
I don't think Maggie knew she did graphic design until she did graphic design. Yeah, it turned out really fantastic. And also, it turned out to be a really fantastic beer. That was a big seller for you guys.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we made a 30-barrel batch of it, just like the one that we would do for this. And, you got enough people who think it's sweet, and there it goes.
Wow, awesome. That's great.
Yeah, so the next steps on our end will be verify with brewers specific brew date that we can make this beer. Reach out to all y'all and say, hey, these are the dates we could brew this beer. When works for you guys to come in and brew it with us? We'll get it on the production schedule. We'll get all the raw ingredients ordered, and then you guys will come in and brew. We'll have a blast doing that.
Oh, yeah.
There might be some future sound bites that come in, like,
And this episode interrupted by when we were brewing at Mobcraft.
and then some weird things that we were doing here. I mean, we can get the grill out if you guys want. We can roast some rats or
All
some
these things are
steaks.
yes. Or
all
yes.
the fun
yeses,
stuff.
all yeses. I'm going to
So-
keep voting yes.
All right. My hand has been up all day.
I want you
and
to
then
put on that list, just put brats at the end. Just
brats. Not in the
not
beer,
in the beer, yeah.
but cooked in the wort. We can do that.
Yeah.
You take
No
boiling
brats
wort.
down.
It's so much easier to boil brats in boiling wort than taking cold beer and heating that up. So, and then from there, we'll go through and brew the beer. We'll go through fermentation. We can test it as it's going down. And then once we get to that ingredient addition side of things, because we'll be doing a couple different variants and trials of it, we'll probably take the maple syrup addition off first, ferment the maple syrup out so it's fully fermented, and then we'll take the fenugreek, look at those side by side, we'll taste them together, see what you guys think would be your favorite, and then we'll move forward with converting the rest of the batch to that afterwards.
And then we'll have to talk about the release date and where people line up and, how far down the block
Wales,
people
bro.
will be
Wales.
able to get all the
So,
variations.
I'm
and
assuming
it'll be whole
a
thing.
lottery system will be put in place.
Brown paper ticket, probably.
So
Yeah.
here at Mobcraft, we are short-staffed and underfunded. So we like to do things like, okay, just buy it now.
Just show up.
Jim's not here, and he's in IT. We'll make him do it.
Oh, nice. Nice. Right. No, but one thing we got to talk about is, at some point, is going to be name. What's going to be the name of the beer? What's the label going to look like? If you have any graphic design friends that want to design a label, we'll have to come up with that. And then the best-selling part about a beer is the name. Because realistically, in today's day and age in the beer market, it's about 50% good beer and about 30% good marketing. And about 20%, this beer made it to you. Well, we need a name at some point. So
No, okay. We can
now or later.
We'll brainstorm.
Later.
I think for now it's going to be a TBD. To be
TBD,
determined.
TTP.
Yeah, I think for now we're going to leave it at that. We've got a beer style picked out. We've got a
production
schedule worked out, and
We got at least one barrel spoken for.
Yep, at least one barrel.
Yep.
So yeah, we're gonna leave it here for now. We're gonna be back at the brewery, so expect another interview, another podcast, another episode, where we're gonna come back and actually talk about the beer that we've suddenly brewed and are now testing and figuring out which variation we're gonna go with. So this is very exciting. You should be excited too, because this is going to be on the market
excited.
very soon. Yeah, thank you again, Henry, for joining us on the Tap Takeover Podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for coming into my brewery and enjoying some lovely beers and helping us come up with the next fun thing we're going to make. I love it.
This is always fun for us. So for me, for Alex,
For Andy.
Jesus?
yeah, and for Kevin, who did all of our video work today.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, well, let's not forget Vince.
And
too.
Vince, who's going to have to edit all this stuff. So thank you for joining us on the Tap Takeover Podcast, a solid non-fail production.